So, with Stefan out at debate tournaments, I am doing a solo episode this week, and we are really going to be talking about leadership, but not just what leadership means for the age of AI, but also what are some of the things that are coming in the next couple of years that we should have on our radar. Because if there's one thing that I think everybody should really know, and that's that leadership in the age of AI is not about having all the answers. It is really about having a clear sense of who you are and how you lead. And we call this your leadership identity. And it's really, really important to have a sort of a North Star when it feels everything around you is completely changing. The tools are evolving faster than any playbook can possibly guide us through. And in that moment, your leadership identity really does become your strategy. It is how you show up in complexity, but more than anything else, it's really going to help guide you in how you motivate and inspire other people to move forward, especially when there is no clear path or clear guidebook on what people should be doing in this moment. And one of the other things that's really important to know is that leadership was never really meant to be a solo act, even though it can often feel like one of the most isolating positions to be in. And in the AI era, I think that's more true than ever. But the leaders that we see who are truly thriving right now in this moment are not really the ones who know the most about AI. They're really the ones who know how to bring people together. They are people who are curious, they are grounded in purpose, and more importantly, they're really willing to rethink how they make decisions, how they communicate, and above all, how they build trust across their teams. And this has really been the core of my work at the start of this year. It's probably why I'm a little bit late on the podcast this week, because we have really across the country been launching something called the AI Power Circle. And this is really our new coaching program for leadership teams where teams come together basically to one, learn about AI, keep up with AI, be able to come together to pause, reflect, and really design not just how they're going to lead in this moment, not just how they're going to keep up with AI, but more importantly, how are they going to build cultures that are clear, cultures that are human-centered, and above all, cultures that are future ready, where people are excited and empowered and inspired, along with maybe a little bit scared about what it is that is going to come next. And here's the part that I think really matters most. Inside the Power Circle, we're not just bringing together different leadership strengths, we're also looking at what are the strengths of AI tools and how do we really integrate those as like members of your leadership team? Because everything in this moment, like I said, we reference this often that Mark Benioff really probably said it best at the World Economic Forum in January of this year. You are the last group of leaders that will only ever manage human teams from this point forward, he said in January. And that was almost like the beginning of the year, which is hard to believe we're coming to the end of the year. But really, he said that this moment is really about shared intelligence. As leaders, you are now going to be leading human teams and digital teams. And it's our job to really create that clarity and momentum for what it can look like when we work together and really bring on these AI tools, not just as tools, but as teammates. And to kick off this week's episode of the podcast, we are going to be looking at an article from Kelly Jones. She is the Chief People Officer at Cisco, and she introduces this idea of a super leader, someone who really pairs emotional intelligence with technology fluency. And it's really just one more reason why a power circle really matters in today's world, and building one really matters in today's world, because before you can really even build any AI strategy, you have to really know not just your leadership identity, but really the strengths of people on your team as well. And so really before you figure out what's going to come next, we have to get grounded in one, how you want to lead, who you're leading with, and why this moment matters so that you can communicate it to everyone in your organization.
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Quidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore how might we design schools.
Okay, so our first article this week is by Kelly Jones, Chief People Officer at Cisco. And while she's writing for the corporate world, every single thing that she says applies probably even more urgently so to the education world as well. Because education leaders, you're not just navigating budgets and policies, you are holding entire communities together. You are guiding teachers, staff, students, families through one of the biggest transformations in human history. And if we're honest, none of us were really trained for this, right? There's no real sort of course for leaders leading an exponential change. There's no sort of certification for navigating AI, the climate of fear, fatigue, and misinformation. And I think this is why being able to come together with other people really, really, really matters. But what I really loved about this article in particular is Kelly introduces this idea of the super leader. This is a leader who doesn't just manage technology, but this is somebody who really leads with emotional intelligence and technological fluency. And what I love about this more, she breaks it down into 4 personas, and not each person has to have all 4 personas, which is why I think being able to come together with other people in your organization and being able to identify the strengths of other leadership members in your organization really matters in this moment to be able to build momentum and kind of move in the direction we need to move into. So we're going to walk through each one, not to really just explain them, but to really see which one do you see yourself in, and maybe your teammates as well, like your other colleagues, because I think knowing your leadership identity is really, really, really important in leading with clarity and also confidence. I think we see this a lot. I always tell people, you don't need to be an AI expert to be an AI leader. You really need to lean into your leadership identity and your strengths. So let's go ahead and get started with the first leadership persona that she shares. So the first persona we're going to discuss is the technologist. And this isn't the person that knows how to code. It's the leader with a growth mindset. This is the kind of person who is not afraid to experiment, they say. So they say in the article that they ask questions like, how might we use AI to make things better for our people? They align tools to problems, not the other way around. And if you have been in any of my workshops, one of my most favorite quotes for describing this is by Don Norman, where he says, a brilliant solution to the wrong problem is worse than no solution at all. So let's solve the right problem. Now, in education, this might be the principal who uses AI to redesign how their team collaborates, or the superintendent who doesn't just roll out an AI tool, but really helps their district build a shared framework for decision making. And again, if you followed any of our work, you know that one of our favorite decision making frameworks and one of our favorite districts that we partnered with is Desert Sands Unified. And I'll drop a link in the show notes. But what this looks like when you build like a decision making framework for your organization for how people are making decisions when it comes to using these AI tools. So, anyways, basically in this persona, you don't have to be technical, you have to be strategic. And that's like the most important part. All right, so the next persona is what they call the empath. And this is a person who creates psychological safety. So you can probably already begin to see why having these different strands and different members of your team really matters. So that burden and that responsibility doesn't just all fall on one person, but collectively you can lead from a place of strength. So basically the empath is going to be, they say in the article, the leader that knows that right now people are scared. They have anxiety. They're hearing all these different things from all over the place. Teachers might feel like they're falling behind. Leaders feel like they're falling behind. Students feel like jobs are going to be taken from them in the future. The empath is somebody who doesn't just ignore this fear. They name it. They call it out. They say, yes, this is a scary time. They create space for questions, and they remind people that learning is not just for the kids. Like AI is not just about kids and their futures. It's really about all of our futures and how it impacts us in many different aspects and areas of society, really not just work. And if I'm being honest, you're listening to the podcast, I know this is something that you really care about. Empathy isn't just those soft skills. It really is that infrastructure of trust really for this moment. And it's why designing schools, we always really say a culture of innovation begins with a culture of empathy, because I think for any of us who have really deployed technology initiatives before, we know that if you start with the apps and you start with the tools, it never yields that kind of success versus starting with people, their challenges, but also their hopes and dreams, and showing how and if technology can be that solution for them, and if not something else. But really what you're doing in that culture is you're designing with people, not for people, and putting something on them. You're really inviting them into that conversation. All right, so this brings us to the next one. And the next one is the philosopher. And the philosopher is somebody who is like the anchor. They ground decisions in ethics and values and long-term impact. Now, these are the people who are going to be asking questions like, how do we use AI without losing our humanity? What kind of digital citizens are we going to be creating, right? What kind of students are we graduating into the world? What does integrity look like in a world where everything is optional? I say this all the time, that one of the hardest questions for our generation in this moment is how do we motivate and inspire our young people, and not just our young people, because there was another article, we're not covering it this week, there was another one about how like there's work slop now basically in all these organizations, and organizations are getting frustrated. They're getting this work back, but they're having to do even more work to clean up what's being given to them because it's AI generated. And this is really what starts to happen when you don't have frameworks for decision making. Because again, I go back to, this isn't just about rules for preserving the 5-paragraph essay. Every single person in your organization is using AI, and being able to have a shared framework for how should you make decisions when using it in this scenario is really how you begin to build that culture of innovation, where the burden of figuring that out isn't really just on one person. And again, for education leaders, this shows up for us in things like how do we redesign assessments, right? How do we launch and roll out AI literacy programs? We're actually training people on the use of these tools. And of course, if you are a follower, not just of the podcast, but of anything I do, one of my favorite frameworks for you doing this is the WISE framework, where we look at well-being, integrity, skills, and engagement. And that is really that philosopher lens in action. I don't know which one I would fall into, but this one really matters to me. I think when we talk about safety for students, I always ask people, are you talking about safety from 9 to 3, like in your four walls of your classroom? Or are you talking about safety for them in the real world, inside the classroom and outside the classroom? And when you begin to look at it from that perspective, the decisions that we make really change. And I think we begin to see why decision making matters, especially today when these AI tools are pretty much embedded into every single thing it is that we're using and doing. All right, the last one that they talk about in this article is the change agent. This is a leader that is not waiting for consensus to try something new. They know that transformation is a rocky road, but they are also ready to help people move through this. And I do think how established your culture is when it comes to change management plays a role here. I don't think you can go from being this traditional organization to like, yeah, and all of a sudden we're going to be super transformational. I think, again, for every single thing it is you're doing, I think knowing that end goal really matters. And that's why our next couple articles today are going to go into what is AI going to look like in 2030? What are some of the big picture things we should have on our radar? We always talk about this. I frame this idea as like preparing the class of AGI, but I think knowing what's going to be coming in, let's say 2030, and being, okay, here's where we are and now coming to the end of 2025, what do we need to do along the way to be successful in where it is we want to go, and giving people those skills and mindset. So these are people who are not just pushing change at people, they are really walking it through with them. But if you've never started that journey of walking, now would be a really good time. And I'll say the Power Circle, if you are interested in joining, I'll drop a link to the show notes, is a fantastic way to bring your leadership team together to be able to do this work. So ultimately, these leaders know that momentum matters more than perfection. They know that they cannot wait for all the pieces to be together. If they do, they will simply fall behind. So if you're listening to these four personas and you're, oh, like, I don't really feel like a super leader, or maybe you're somebody who feels like a super leader, but you're like, I don't have a leadership title. I think it's so important to remember that leaders are not defined by their titles. They are defined by their ideas and impact. And these days, I don't think I know a single organization that would not love to have people step up and be able to help lead and do those things in this moment, if that is something that you truly desire. The truth is, like I said, none of us are trained for this, but all of us can go ahead and grow into this and be those people in this moment. And I think that's what this world needs right now, is people who are brave enough and courageous enough to really come forward and really evolve together. So here is a prompt for you to try as you think about and explore your leadership identity. So we'll put it up here on the screen, and we'll also put it down in the show notes. But if you're listening audio only, let me read it to you. It says, I want to explore my leadership identity, not in theory, but in real terms. Ask me 5 thoughtful, open-ended questions to help me reflect on how I lead through change, how I support others, and how I make decisions when there's no clear playbook. After I answer, help me identify the leadership strands I'm leaning on most and where I might have gaps. I want this to feel like an executive coaching session, clear, honest, and focused on helping me grow in the age of AI. And of course, if you're inside the AI Power Circle, we'll be modeling and doing this prompt with you inside there during our strategy calls. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our next article. This is from The Information, and I finally pulled the trigger and hit pay. It's an expensive subscription, there's no doubt, but I feel like they just published really good quality articles. And this was the one, especially because if you know how deep I am right now in this topic of really helping people think of building AI teams. When I saw this title, it was titled How Anthropic and OpenAI Are Developing AI Coworkers. I was like, all right, it is time to hit buy. So I got a subscription. So if you're inside the AI Power Circle or even here on the podcast, you will benefit a little bit from this knowledge because I got to read the whole article. Now, if there's one thing that we say inside the Power Circle, it's this. The future of leadership isn't just about managing people, it's about managing systems of intelligence that are both human and artificial. And I think this is just such a huge opportunity because I often talk about the book In Search of Deeper Learning from Joel Mehta and Sarah Fine, where they coupled, this was many years ago, did this research study on let's go and look at these 21st century schools. And what they said they ended up finding was that there is no 21st century school, but everywhere they went, there were pockets of excellence. And to me, one of the biggest opportunities in AI is how do we find these pockets of excellence within our organizations, but also in many other places that we're inspired by as well, and really train these AI teammates to be able to scale that. So we go siloed intelligence to being able to create organizations where we have this concept of shared intelligence via these AI tools. And lately, if you've been working with me inside the Power Circle, or really in any of my workshops, you know that we've been doing this via building gems inside of Gemini, because they've given this to schools for free if you are a Google Workspace school and you have those licenses. But this is stuff you can also do inside Microsoft Copilot. You can also do it inside ChatGPT with GPTs. And this is really where I think a lot of people should be spending their time right now, is really thinking about, what does that workflow look like when it's not just you on the team, or it's you and another person, and now there's 3 AIs on the team as well? What do those workflows look like? What do decisions look like? What does shared responsibility look like? And how do we begin moving in that direction? And that's exactly what companies like Anthropic and OpenAI and others are doing behind the scenes right now. But they are taking things a step further. They are not just training AI to answer questions and scale this shared intelligence. They're really training it to use the same tools that me and you use every single day. And so this is like, we're going to get to this in a moment, but it's really that idea of reinforcement learning. So for example, if you are a group that uses things like Salesforce or Excel, or maybe even how you use Canva or how you use your gradebook, basically what they do is AI is not just sitting on the sidelines. It's basically watching you and learning from each and every single thing that you are doing, every single task step by step in your workflow. So these companies are not just building AI agents that support people, but agents that collaborate with them, and in many ways do what they are already doing, especially the knowledge work on computers. And in an ideal world, this is where you want to get to, is amazing. If I can hand off my knowledge work or my computer work to an AI tool to do, say, 70% of it, that opens me up to be with people and really building that connection and those kinds of pieces that we know that as people, we do best. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of context. Okay, I mentioned reinforcement learning. So these labs are creating something called reinforcement learning environments. And basically, these are like fake applications or like simulations of real world platforms where AI tools can basically go in and learn how to use the tools the same way a human would. And then what they do is they bring in these human experts, doctors, coders, equity analysis, even NASA data scientists, to basically model how they work. So it's almost like AI has become an intern, right? But not an intern that's there to help you. It's an intern that's there to really learn how to be you. So AI is basically going to watch how a top performer does something, and then it tries dozens and dozens of times. It gets trained on what worked. And it's really not that different if you think about it for how we onboard new people into our organizations. I remember when I first joined Apple, I spent the first 6 months. So when I joined Apple, 50% of my job was in the briefing center, where we would have different groups come from really across the world to come and learn about Apple technology, what it could do, and all that kind of stuff. And I spent a good, I think 3 to 6 months. It was definitely 6 months, but in those, after about month 3, I started participating and practicing and doing things too. But it was just come and watch, just come and watch and learn, watch and learn, watch and learn. See all the different styles people have for how they facilitate these briefings, and choose your best practices and then make it your own, and then go ahead and launch, and then you get to do it as well. And I think the implications of this are just massive, because it is going to take leaders with real intentionality who are training AI tools in this way to do this type of work, but are also going to be creating space for new work for people to be doing. And that goes back to a lot of the work that Eric Brynjolfsson does and his team at Stanford, and just these different papers that they've been publishing lately about the importance of augmenting work, not automating and replacing work. But again, these are going to be choices that we make, and we can't even begin to probably make these choices if we don't start talking about, what does AI do best, what do people do best, and what do, what does working together look like? Because we talk a lot about, oh, humans do this best, but if you ask people, okay, define that for me, what does it look like? Where is it fitting into your org? Not a lot of people can answer those questions with confidence and clarity. So I think it's just important to remember that the future of work, not just for us, but also for our kids, is not just building teams of people. It's these blended teams of both humans and these AI teammates as well, or AI agents, if you want to call them that. And suddenly it's not anymore just about doing the task, but it's really about, what does that collaboration look like, and who is going to be delegated what task to complete. And I keep talking about the Power Circle because honestly, I've had such an amazing start to the year in launching this in this way. And it's been so incredible to see teams really come together and just feel more confident about their leadership in this moment. But one of the things we're really excited for, a couple of questions that we just do: what work should I do and what work should AI be doing? How do we design workflows where humans are the ultimate decision maker? We share this image where, as the human, you are that human spark, but you are also that final decision maker. And it's that messy middle where we get bogged down in the nitty gritty of work that often prevents us from doing the things that we wish we had more time to do. And then last but not least, a really other big question that we ask is, what does it feel like to trust AI the same way you trust a person? There's going to be differences. We have to name those differences, identify those differences. And you can only really do that when you begin working with these tools with that mindset that, hey, this is a member of my team. It reports to this person. It goes here on the org chart. It works with so and so and so, and these are the tasks that it's doing right now. And then you're mapping. How well did it do? Where did it perform well? Where did it not perform well? And you're moving from there. And I think as theoretical and futuristic as this might sound, I bring you these articles to tell you this is happening today, right? The AI labs in the world, not just the AI labs, companies as well are doing this with billions and billions of dollars behind them, only more being invested in this because this is really the future. And I think this is the moment to really ask as a leader, are you ready to lead a team that is not just people, but that is AI as well? Because even if your organization isn't formally hiring AI, I always tell people, every single person in your organization is using AI tools, which basically just means everyone in your org went out and hired a bunch of freelancers to do their work with them. Those are freelancers without data privacy accounts, like security accounts. Those are freelancers that are not trained in your mission, your vision, your values. Those are just like almost like taking random people and bringing them into your org to do work. And I always say we would never do that. We can't even get inside our orgs without a badge or a name being written down or something like that. Yet these AI tools are infiltrating our organizations day after day. And without those guidelines, without sort of those decision-making frameworks, I think in many ways we leave our organizations and our people vulnerable. All right, so that's that one. Let's go ahead and move into a new one. All right, so to make all of this even more real, I'm going to share with you a couple of highlights from a pretty lengthy report called AI in 2030, Extrapolating Current Trends. And it basically was commissioned by Google DeepMind. And while this does not reflect the position or the endorsement of Google DeepMind, they were commissioned to do this work. And basically, it talks about what is AI possibly going to look like. It basically projects trends for what it's going to look like in 2030. And let's just say if this is true, we have a lot we need to be thinking about. So basically what they said is one of the things is that we are going to see exponential progress in AI is on a very steady trend. And it projects that by 2030, the largest AI models will be trained with 1,000 times the computing power of today's models. The investments required will be in the hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're seeing people invest in those ways. And they said that the largest training runs will consume the power of a large city. And I will tell you a lot of places where I go, like environmental concerns definitely come up. One of the best answers, or the best responses I've probably heard, and I'll link it in the show notes, Trevor Noah recently interviewed Mustafa Suleiman, and they have a whole conversation on this. And I think it's just interesting to listen to these people's perspectives because they're the ones building this technology and hearing. But I know the environment question comes up for a lot of us, and I found that to be a really good reference, so I will add it into the show notes. But anyways, let's come back to our discussion on this concept of human and AI teams, because I think one of the reasons we have to start taking this topic really seriously is we can't just keep thinking about AI as it is today. We have to be able to be like, okay, where was it 2 years ago, just 2 years ago? And where could it possibly be in the next 5 years? And this report calls it a virtual worker. I feel like everybody has a different name for it. I personally like the name teammate because I think it's something that we can immediately visualize in our heads. I don't think we visualize a virtual coworker or an AI agent, but I think when you say teammate, there are a lot of norms and values and interactions that kind of immediately come to mind for what that feels like. It feels familiar for people. And the specific capabilities they forecast for 2030 are the very building blocks that these AI teammates need to be successful. For example, they predict that they will be able to autonomously implement complex scientific software from a simple description. They will be able to assist mathematicians in fleshing out proof sketches and intuitions, and they will be able to answer complex, open-ended questions to guide lab experiments in biology. So when you hear me open this episode talking about the need for leaders to be technologists, empaths, philosophers, change agents, this report is like the data-driven reason why, when I keep saying, think about 2030, build this power circle, I think one of the reasons I'm reinforcing it so much in this episode is the number of reports now that are coming out for us about AI capabilities. We're going to do another one today at the end as well. There's a lot of them now to where it's like hard to even cover all of them. But ultimately, it is going to be human and people leadership that is that one variable that's going to determine where people fall in this equation, right? That determine how our teams, how our students are going to be able to thrive in this new reality. And here's the other thing that I say, because sometimes people say, "Oh, AI is never going to be that good," and "Oh no," and "Don't believe the hype," and "Don't believe this and that." And here's my thinking and my philosophy on this. If you are somebody who reads a report like AI 2030, right, and you're looking at this and thinking, "Oh my God, wow, like by 2030, these AI tools are going to be even more capable than all of us combined," I need to double down right now and really begin to, I think it was Demis Hassabis who said, the most important skill we need right now is being able to learn how to learn. So if you're that person who's like, "I'm going to double down, I'm going to go and join Sabba in one of her power circles, and I'm going to bring my organization and my leaders together, and we are going to double down on learning about this." But let's say tomorrow it doesn't happen, right? And AI doesn't become that great, and it all just falls apart, and we're only left with what we have today. The only downside in that scenario is you 10x your own skills and your own capabilities and the capabilities of your leadership team. However, if you are that person who's like, "We're going to wait and see, that's just hype, it's not really going to do this," and you're just waiting, waiting, waiting. If it does happen, which is pretty likely it will, you're going to be stuck. And one of the things that I often share with people that I was reflecting on recently is I feel like AI is a really unforgiving technology. And I think back a lot to people who deployed one-to-one devices during the pandemic. It was hard. It was a lot. It was a big overhaul, and a lot of people did it. But if you were somebody who deployed in 2012, 2013, 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, but then you were not one of those people that deployed it in one of those years, basically. You deployed it in 2020 or during the pandemic. You could have taken the playbook of any of those years and applied it to your 2020 rollout, right? Yes, there might have been some like better MDMs and things like that. But for the most part, deployment only became easier, not harder. Whereas when I think about AI, even if you were to go to a session, because I see this happen a lot, people will go to a session at a conference and be like, "Oh, look at somebody's AI rollout plan for how they were approaching this over the past year or 2 years," and come back to their organizations today, 2 years later after they did that, and be like, "Okay, now we're going to start doing this because that's what we heard at this conference from these people." You're late. You don't have that luxury of time to be able to be like, "Oh, we're going to take a year to do XYZ." And so that's what I mean when I say I just feel like AI is a very unforgiving technology, and it's not waiting for you this time, right? If you don't go step by step with it and you're not keeping up along the way, and then all of a sudden you have to do something, I think it's painful. And I think I watch that happen in places, and I can feel the pain and the frustration of what an organization has to go through when they maybe didn't make some of the moves that they could have earlier. And that's never to say that it's too late. The point is that try to be aware of what is going on. And if you're here and you're listening to the podcast, you are probably one of those people. So maybe tell your friends. All right. So as we look toward 2030, it's really not just enough to learn how AI works today. Here's how to prompt. This is the latest update in ChatGPT. Yes, that's all important to know. But we also need to understand where it's headed in the next couple of years, who it's going to impact, and how to build the literacy, the policies, and the protections that are going to allow, like I said, people to really thrive alongside the acceleration of this technology. And the reason I bring that up is because now we're going to turn to a little bit of a more somber kind of story. And that is, this marked a major turning point in how we talk about the real world impact of AI. Couple studies as well, and a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on this topic too. So recently, the U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime and Counterterrorism held its first official hearing on the harms of AI chatbots, titled "Examining the Harm of AI Chatbots." And you can search it. Obviously, I'm going to link into the show notes if you would like to look into this hearing further. It was emotional, and it was in many ways very overdue as well. And one of the things that I think we didn't do with social media that hopefully maybe we do now for kids is be more proactive about those guardrails from these companies earlier on. So families who have lost children due to their interactions with AI chatbots shared their stories. Like I said, it's definitely not an easy thing to listen to, but I think it's really important. And these were not headlines or hypotheticals. These were parents in pain, really calling out a system that had really failed them. And a lot of this was sparked by Matthew Rain. I will also link for you the Substack article that was written by the Center for Humane Technology, who are along in this Matthew Rain case. They are helping alongside there. And I think they're really going to be a big reason why this case is going to get a lot more publicity than, say, perhaps some other ones were. But Matthew Rain, who is the father of Adam Rain, who is a 16-year-old who committed suicide after his interactions with ChatGPT, said, "We're here because we believe Adam's death was avoidable." Sam Altman said, "We should deploy AI while the stakes are low." I asked this committee and I asked Sam Altman, low stakes for who? And that single line kind of tells you a lot about the moment that we're in and why, if you think back earlier to when I talked about, if you've listened to anything I've said, I've been really opposed to like the stoplight model, or I don't care if you turn it into bubblegum colors and make it like an assessment framework. Like these things are solely designed for safety in writing an essay. And I think it's so important for people when they consider safety to consider not just inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom as well. And what skills and decision-making tools are we giving our young people, especially in a world where we know that these AI companies are marketing heavily towards them? There was testimony in the hearing as well from Megan Garcia, Matthew Rain, Jane Doe, and it was just a really painful pattern that you see parents who feel like they did everything they could, screen time controls, limits on apps, open communication, but they still lost their children to AI systems in that way. And there's a lot of nuance here as well, but I think it is important to lean into these to really recognize that our kids are interacting with these tools outside of school, whether or not we have made the decision to introduce it to them inside of school. As Dr. Mitch Prinstein, I don't know if I said that right, of the American Psychological Association explained in the hearing, he said these systems are designed to feel human, especially to vulnerable young users. And Common Sense Media's Robbie Turney said that the bots are optimized for engagement and not safety. Now, one of the things we did get this week, OpenAI did share that there are now parental controls available on ChatGPT for you to link your child's account and with your account as well. But again, though, this is where I go back to when we think about guidelines, and again, we think about the work that we're doing in our communities. How are we involving our families? How are we having these conversations? Because again, it's great that they launch these, but this really has to be like a team effort. It can't really just be AI companies, you be responsible for XYZ. Every single stakeholder is going to have to play their part in this moment. So we'll see what happens. I think it's definitely one for people to keep their eye on in terms of this case and see what happens better. Because as one parent said in there, innovation must not come at the cost of our children's life or anyone's life. We owe them better. And I think it's not just AI companies that owe kids better. I think we all collectively owe kids better in this moment, especially given what we have navigated with social media and the things that have come before. So this sort of mindset, and I think stories like this, takes us into our next article, which was a study that the Pew Research Center just released of over 5,000 US adults asking a very simple question: how do Americans feel about AI's impact on people and society? And I will tell you, people are not super excited. And I think a reason people are not excited, I see this obviously just in a micro level in the organizations I'm working with. People have no knowledge. And if they have knowledge, sometimes it's wrong knowledge. The knowledge isn't framed correctly. And one of the things I often share is one of my favorite quotes from Steve Bartlett, who, is the host of the Diary of a CEO. Basically, one of the things he says is most people never get the power they need to make the decisions they need to make because they are always too afraid to fail. And he has this beautiful cycle where he says failure is feedback, feedback is knowledge, and knowledge is power. But because most people are too afraid to fail in the beginning or try anything new or run any experiments or dip their toes into things that they're afraid of, they never get the knowledge they need to have the power to make informed decisions. And that's Nelson Mandela, right? Like education is the most powerful weapon you can have to change the world. Education and knowledge is power. And I think being able to, regardless of what you think about AI, having a framing, especially when you're introducing it into your organization, that is aligned with your vision, your values, your mission, which every single time I work with somebody, the first thing I do is go on their website. And I have to tell you, so many of you already have this language. You have this language. You just need to pull it out and you need to leverage it and build a story around that's going to bring your community together. So bottom line, people are mostly not excited. They are very concerned. And I think rightly, I think when you're having these conversations like that empath, right? Name the fear. Name the fear. Find the leader in your organization who's going to be comfortable building that psychological safety. Because I think when people see that you recognize, yes, there's opportunity, yes, there's challenges, they're much more willing to engage in that dialogue with you and design what it is that is going to come next. So anyways, 50% said they're more concerned than excited about AI in their daily life. That is up from 37% just a few years ago. Only 10% said they're more excited than concerned, and 57% rate the societal risks of AI as high, more than double who say the benefits are high. People are paying attention, but again, I think with media and algorithms and the kind of news that gets pushed to people. You just have no idea what kind of knowledge people are consuming. So it's better for us to be the ones to create a narrative in our organizations. When it comes to human abilities, things like creativity, relationships, or problem solving, people are very skeptical. They said 53% believe AI will worsen people's ability to think creatively. 50% say weaken our ability to form meaningful relationships, and only 29% of people believe it will improve problem solving. Now, of course, if you listen to anything I say or anything I do, I think it has huge potential in all those areas. However, whether that happens or not is a choice that we get to make. If we are passive, one of the areas in which we've been having this conversation a lot lately with our partners is around thinking. Because I think I said it before on the podcast, if there's one thing I have heard consistently from people, it's that people aren't thinking anymore, kids aren't thinking anymore, thinking is going away. And then you ask people, okay, what does thinking look like? And it's like a pause, right? Thinking is not just writing a 5-paragraph essay or doing a rough draft of a paper. Thinking is my conversations with people, my insights with people, the way in which I'm connecting dots with people. But if I don't have a wide variety of experiences to choose from, how am I connecting those dots? Right. So when I think about thinking, that's what it looks like for me. But I think this is a very important conversation to have. And in my workshops, one of the things I've gotten really intentional about is the process of thinking. And I'll actually walk people through. Before I used to do those exercises, let's have a discussion over here. Let's do an individual reflection here. Let's do some post-its here. Let's take a photo of something here. Then let's use AI here. And then let's go back and do XYZ. And now I name every single step. And I actually take time to name those steps to show people that if somebody came in and said, okay, how are people thinking today in your workshop? I could be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here is that journey that we took them on. And the beautiful part about that is that journey can take so many different forms. And of course, your AI tools can help you design those journeys as well. All right, now here's where it gets really interesting. Even if people are super worried about AI, they are also using AI, okay? Nearly 3/4 of people said they'd be open to AI helping with daily tasks. 6 in 10 said they want more control over how AI is used in their lives, meaning I like it. I want more control over how to use it. And 76% said it's very important to know whether content, images, videos, text, and things like that were made by human or AI. But 53% of people said they're not really confident they can tell the difference. And I think it was just today. So today is Tuesday, September 30th. OpenAI just released Sora 2. It is an unbelievable video. I will link it for you in the show notes. We'll talk more about it in our next update video. But basically in this one, the whole video is made by Sora 2, which is their new video generation model. And it's mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing. AI literacy is not just really about teaching people how to prompt or whatnot. We have a gap right now between exposure, like what kinds of things people are exposed to, and the direct correlation that's having on their understanding of AI. And I think right now that is really a call to action for leaders, is bridging that gap. So this concept, like I said, of AI literacy, it's not just teaching what's the model out there and how to use a prompt, but really helping people make sense of a world where one, truth is harder to verify, trust is so fragile, and where technology is completely changing our relationship with work, with communication, and really even with each other. Again, all things that we cover inside the AI Power Circle, where we engage in questions like what kind of culture are we creating with AI? How do we help people feel agency with AI, not just exposure in terms of using the tool? And more importantly, how do we build AI systems, classrooms, and companies that feel more human, not less? I always say for every conversation you have about AI, you should double that and have conversations about your people and their strengths and things like that as well. So to me, this peer research report is really a mirror. It's telling us where people stand, how people are thinking and feeling. But as always, I'm telling you, run these kinds of surveys inside your organization as well. Because I think one of my favorite quotes that we often share as well is assumptions are like termites to a relationship. And I think when you are leading, having very clear data-driven picture of not just what AI can do, but where your people are at is what separates hype from fear and just really helps us make decisions that are grounded in data and it being informed versus decisions that are grounded in assumptions. All right, so this brings us to our last article for this episode, and that is a new study that was launched by OpenAI called GDP-Val. Now, this is not one of those like weird academic tests that they usually run. In fact, they usually say when we test the AI models, we run these like coding tests, and I think they just don't resonate with people. What they did in GDP-Val was basically create a benchmark that was designed to measure how well AI performs on like everyday tasks that me and you do, right? So things that are economically valuable. Again, like I said, tasks that me and you basically do. So to do this, what they did was they included industry professionals with an average of 14 years of experience to create tasks that they do based on their day-to-day work. And they cover 44 different jobs from nurses to lawyers to software developers and financial analysts, and across the 9 biggest sectors basically of the US economy. And the headline finding is a pretty big one. The best AI models are now approaching industry experts in deliverable quality. And this is just, we are only in 2025. In their head-to-head comparisons, basically the top model was Claude Opus 4.1. I guess kudos to ChatGPT for not putting themselves as number one. It was rated as good as or better than the human expert nearly half the time, with a 47.6% win or tie rate. Now, I think a number like that can feel really intimidating, but here is why I think it can be something that is empowering for people as well. Okay, so first of all, the report focuses on AI assistance, not replacement. And I think this is a message that a lot of economists and people are trying to get out to leadership teams. Do not automate every single process, augment, find new opportunities for your people. But, like I said, this requires some like real, like thoughtful, committed work on behalf of leadership teams to do this, which I will also say not everybody is doing, right? The data is telling us that most companies are really fixated a lot more on automation, not augmentation. Okay. So, anyways, basically, the report showed that when you pair these models with human experts, you actually make those experts significantly faster and more effective. So, for example, in one scenario, using GPT-5, they said had the potential to make a human expert almost 1.4 times faster on a task. And so, to me, this really reinforces this idea of AI as a teammate, a collaborator, freeing up our time so that we can really focus on what matters most. Okay. So now the next area that they go into is this research also mapped the strengths and weaknesses, right? I said that earlier, right? When you're thinking about, hey, okay, we have this AI teammate that we built, it's helping us, let's say, in lesson design, it's doing this really well, it's not doing this so well. This is the kind of stuff and the testing we have to do right now. And the report found that instruction following was the biggest failure for most models. And it also showed that when a task was made ambiguous and less specific, the AI's performance dropped. And this is why when we teach, especially the creation of gems, we always say one task. I always say people are always like, we wear so many hats. And I always say, your AI tool isn't going to wear multiple hats. It's almost got like a zero tolerance policy for something like that. And so you have to be very specific about the tasks you're giving, the instructions you're giving, and things like that. And I think for leaders, this is good news, right? It tells us that our ability to provide clear context, navigate ambiguity, and figure things out is exactly where humans shine. So let's get rid of some of that knowledge, nitty-gritty type work and really allow people to get into solving some of the really big problems of our time. Because God knows there is no shortage of problems that need to be solved. Forget with inside our industries, but across the globe. And so let's let people do the work that really brings them alive, that matters most, and that really energizes them. And so to me, this kind of research, while at first glance can almost sometimes feel a little bit like a threat, it really isn't. We should really see this as a guide that is giving us the clarity to move beyond fear and really begin to be like, okay, this is where we should double down. This is the type of strategy we should be thinking about and really working towards in our organization. But above all, these reports really help us answer what kind of work should humans be doing? What kind of work should AI be doing? So that we can really intentionally design roles and cultures that really are future ready. Like we say the words all the time, but this is the data you need. And this is the insight, right? When we talk about futures thinking and foresight and okay, at a time, like I said, when people say we have no idea what's coming, we've got some pretty good data in our hands. Like this one episode alone gives you a lot to be able to work with. When we intentionally design roles and build cultures where people are at the center, this is probably, in my opinion, what the best shot that we have really at making sure that everyone has a place moving forward in the future. And so that was a lot that we covered on today's episode. I know I missed a week, so there was just a lot to catch up on. We went from this emotional landscape of AI to the fears that people have to the leadership mindset and identity that you need to really lead in this moment with courage and with clarity. And we talked a little bit about the capabilities of AI and how, like I said, don't be that person that thinks it's hype. Don't be that person that's going to wait and see. Be that person who operates with the assumption that it's going to be better than you, that it's going to take your job. And in that scenario, you just double down. And it's really beautiful because you find new parts of yourself to be excited about. You find new parts of yourself that energize you to really focus on work and things that, matter most, that you really want to do. The future is not something that happens to us, right? It's really something that we build moment by moment, conversation by conversation, decision by decision. And with the right mindset and that commitment to really leading together, we can really guide both our teams and our communities in building a future where this technology really serves us in being more connected and being more creative, and above all, in being more human. I've talked a lot in this episode about the AI Power Circle. I would love to have you join me inside the program. Build an AI Power Circle inside your organization. If you're interested in learning more, DM me, reach out, let's have a call. And as always, I will drop a link into the show notes below. If you have any questions on today's episode or any questions on any other topics you would like us to cover, let me know. Until then, we will see you next time.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.